Munich, West Germany, October 12, 1957. The offices of the Ukrainian émigré newspaper Sukasnist, the present, located at Karlsplatz 8. A young man in his mid-20s climbs the narrow wooden staircase. His name is Bohdan Stashynsky. He's carrying what looks like a rolled-up newspaper. At the second-floor landing, he runs into 48-year-old Lev Rebet, editor of the newspaper and a prominent Ukrainian nationalist exile. "Excuse me," Stashynsky says in German. Rebet nods and steps aside. Stashynsky raises the newspaper. Hidden inside is a metal tube, 7 inches long. He points it directly at Rebet's face, a soft puff of vapor. Rebet gasps, clutches his chest, and collapses. Within seconds, he's dead. Stashynsky walks calmly down the stairs, steps out onto the street, and crushes a glass ampule between his teeth, an antidote to protect himself from the poison he's just released. The Munich police find Rebet dead at the bottom of the stairs. No wounds, no signs of struggle. The medical examiner's conclusion? Heart attack, natural causes, and the assassin? Long gone. Mission accomplished. But 4 years later, Stashynsky would do something no KGB assassin had ever done. He would defect to the West and confess everything. Tonight, we're examining the weapon that made those murders possible and the confession that shocked the world. To understand this weapon, we first need to understand the man who used it. Bohdan Stashynsky was born on November 4, 1931, in the village of Borshchovichi in western Ukraine, territory that had been part of Poland until 1939, when the Soviet Union annexed it under the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. His childhood was shaped by war. The Germans occupied western Ukraine in 1941. The Soviets returned in 1944. The region was torn between competing powers, and many Ukrainian families, including Stashynsky's, sympathized with nationalist movements seeking independence. The NKVD, the predecessor to the KGB, knew all about the Stashynsky family's nationalist leanings, and in 1950, when Bohdan was just 19 years old, they made him an offer he couldn't refuse: work for Soviet intelligence or face the consequences for your family. Stashynsky was recruited into the second chief directorate of the KGB, responsible for internal security and counterintelligence. His initial assignments were routine, informing on fellow students, monitoring suspected nationalists. But his handlers saw potential. He was intelligent, methodical, and critically, he could pass as a Westerner. His appearance, his language skills, his ability to blend in. In 1954, he was transferred to Moscow for specialized training. This wasn't ordinary spy work. This was Department 13, the KGB's Wet Affairs Division. Assassinations. His target was identified: Ukrainian nationalist leaders living in exile in Munich, West Germany. After World War II, Munich had become home to thousands of Ukrainian refugees and dissidents, people who had fled Soviet rule and continued to advocate for Ukrainian independence from abroad. They published newspapers, they organized political movements, they kept the dream of Ukrainian sovereignty alive. To the Soviet Union, these émigrés were dangerous enemies. They undermined Soviet legitimacy. They encouraged resistance within Ukraine. They had to be eliminated. 2 names topped the KGB's target list: Lev Rebet, editor of the newspaper Suchasnist, intellectual leader of the Ukrainian independence movement, and former member of the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists. Stepan Bandera, the most famous Ukrainian nationalist leader, commander of the Ukrainian insurgent army during World War II, and a symbol of Ukrainian resistance. The Soviets hated him more than any other émigré. Stashynsky's mission: kill them both. Make it look natural. But first, he needed the weapon. The weapon was developed at Laboratory 12, officially known as the Chamber, the KGB's secret poison laboratory in Moscow. This was the same facility that created the lipstick pistol we covered in video number 1. the same lab that would later develop the ricin pellet for the Bulgarian umbrella assassination in video number 3. Laboratory 12 specialized in creating undetectable poisons and ingenious delivery systems. Their mandate was simple: develop weapons that could kill specific targets without leaving any forensic evidence pointing to murder. The weapon designed for Stashynsky was a masterpiece of lethal simplicity. It was a metal tube, approximately 7 inches long and 1 inch in diameter. Some sources describe it as resembling a thick sausage, cylindrical, heavy, made of steel or aluminum. Inside the tube was a firing mechanism powered by a spring. At one end, a chamber held a small glass ampule filled with liquid poison. At the other end, a nozzle designed to atomize the liquid into a fine mist. The poison itself was prussic acid, also known as hydrogen cyanide, or HCN. Hydrogen cyanide is one of the fastest-acting poisons known. It works by blocking cellular respiration, preventing cells from using oxygen. The victim's body essentially suffocates at the cellular level. Symptoms appear within seconds: rapid breathing, confusion, seizures, loss of consciousness, cardiac arrest. Death can occur in as little as 1 to 3 minutes, depending on the dose. And critically, for the KGB's purposes, hydrogen cyanide breaks down rapidly in the body and was extremely difficult to detect with 1950s toxicology. A victim found dead would show symptoms consistent with a heart attack or stroke. Natural causes. The delivery system was equally clever. To use the weapon, Stashynsky would first load a glass ampule of liquid prussic acid into the chamber. Then he'd conceal the tube, often wrapped in a newspaper or hidden in a pocket. He'd approach the target in a confined space. A stairwell was ideal. Just before firing, he'd crush a capsule antidote between his teeth, sodium thiosulfate and amyl nitrite, which would temporarily protect him from the poison. Then he'd point the tube at the victim's face and press the firing mechanism. The spring would crush the glass ampule and force the liquid through the atomizing nozzle, creating a fine mist that would spray directly into the target's face at point-blank range. The victim would inhale the poisonous mist. The cyanide would enter the bloodstream through the lungs. Within seconds, they would collapse. And the assassin? He'd already taken the antidote. He'd simply walk away, seemingly uninvolved. The weapon had several advantages. It was silent. No gunshot, no explosion, just a soft hiss of compressed gas. It was quick. The victim died within seconds to minutes. It was undetectable. The cyanide broke down rapidly, and there were no physical wounds. It offered plausible deniability. The death appeared completely natural, and it was simple, no complex mechanisms to fail, but it also had limitations. Very short range, you had to be within a foot of the target's face. A confined space was required. Outdoors, the mist would disperse too quickly. It was dangerous to the user. If the antidote failed, the assassin could be poisoned, and it was single use. After firing, the tube had to be discarded. KGB instructors at Laboratory 12 tested the weapon on animals to demonstrate its effectiveness to Stashynsky. According to his later testimony, they brought in a dog, sprayed it with the poison, and watched it die within moments. The message was clear: this weapon worked. Stashynsky underwent extensive training in Moscow. He practiced the approach, the concealment, the firing motion, how to crush the antidote capsule at exactly the right moment, what to do if the target moved or if someone else appeared. He was drilled repeatedly. Approach naturally. Fire quickly. Walk away calmly. Show no emotion. By mid-1957, the KGB deemed him ready. His handlers gave him a passport, travel documents, and a cover identity. He would pose as a German businessman traveling on legitimate business, and he was given his first target, Lev Rebet. On October 12, 1957, Stashynsky arrived in Munich. He had the poison spray gun concealed in a rolled-up newspaper. He had his antidote capsules. He had his orders. He surveilled Rebet for several days, learning his routines. Rebet worked at the newspaper offices at Karlsplatz 8. He usually arrived mid-morning. The building had a narrow wooden staircase, perfect for what Stashynsky needed to do. That morning, Stashynsky waited at the bottom of the stairs. When Rebet entered and began climbing to the second floor, Stashynsky followed. At the landing, he made his move. "Excuse me," he said, as if asking Rebet to step aside. Rebet paused. Stashynsky raised the newspaper, pointed the concealed tube, and fired. The mist hit Rebet in the face. He gasped, staggered, and fell. Stashynsky walked down the stairs and left the building. Outside, he crushed the antidote capsule and swallowed it, feeling the bitter chemicals on his tongue. Then he walked to a nearby tram stop and left the area. Within an hour, he was on a train back to East Germany, and from there to Moscow. Lev Rebet was found dead at the bottom of the stairwell. Police were called. Medical examiners found no signs of foul play. No wounds, no violence. The conclusion, heart attack, natural causes. The KGB was satisfied. The weapon had worked perfectly. Back in Moscow, Stashynsky reported to his superiors. They congratulated him, paid him a bonus, and told him to prepare for the next assignment. 2 years later, October 15, 1959, Stashynsky returned to Munich. This time, the target was Stepan Bandera. Bandera was far more prominent than Rebet. He was the symbol of Ukrainian nationalism, a figure the Soviets particularly despised. His assassination would send a message to all Ukrainian dissidents. No one was safe, not even the most famous. Bandera lived at Kreitmayerstrasse 7 in Munich. Stashynsky conducted surveillance, learning Bandera's daily patterns. On October 15th, Stashynsky waited in the entrance hall of Bandera's apartment building. He had an improved version of the poison spray. KGB engineers had made refinements based on the Rebet operation. When Bandera returned home around noon, Stashynsky was waiting. As Bandera reached for his mailbox, Stashynsky approached, raised the weapon, and fired. The poison mist hit Bandera in the face. He collapsed immediately. Stashynsky left the building and disposed of the weapon in the Isar River. He crushed his antidote capsule and returned to East Berlin. Stepan Bandera was rushed to hospital but died shortly after arrival. The initial diagnosis, heart attack, but this time, something was different. Bandera's wife was suspicious. Her husband had been healthy. This didn't make sense. She demanded a more thorough autopsy. German pathologists found traces of cyanide in Bandera's tissues. The death was ruled suspicious, possibly poisoning, though the source was unclear. The case made international headlines. Ukrainian émigré organizations immediately suspected Soviet involvement. The Munich police opened a murder investigation, but they had no suspect, no weapon, no evidence. And Stashynsky? He was back in Moscow, where he received the Order of the Red Banner, one of the Soviet Union's highest military honors, personally awarded by KGB chairman Alexander Shelepin. He had successfully completed 2 high-profile assassinations. He was a hero of the Soviet state, but something was wrong. Guilt was eating at him. In 1960, Stashynsky met a German woman named Inga Pohl in East Berlin. They fell in love. She knew nothing of his real work. He told her he was a translator. They married in 1960 and had a son. But when their baby died in 1961, from natural causes, something broke in Stashynsky. He couldn't live with what he'd done. He couldn't live the lie anymore. Inga had suspected something was wrong with his story for months. The inconsistencies, the unexplained trips, the fear in his eyes. In August 1961, as the Berlin Wall was being constructed, Stashynsky made a decision. He told Inga the truth, everything. The murders, the KGB, the poison. Her reaction shocked him. "We need to go west, now." On August 12, 1961, Bohdan Stashynsky and his wife walked into the American sector of West Berlin and surrendered to American authorities. What he told them stunned Western intelligence. He confessed to both murders, described the weapon in detail, revealed the KGB training methods, named his handlers, explained the operations from start to finish. The Americans handed him over to West German authorities, and in October 1962, Stashynsky stood trial in Karlsruhe, West Germany. The trial was a sensation. For the first time, a KGB assassin was publicly testifying about Soviet assassination operations. The poison spray gun was described in detail. Laboratory 12 was exposed. The methods were revealed. The court heard Stashynsky's full confession. He expressed remorse. He said he'd been coerced, that the KGB had threatened his family, that he'd been trapped in a system he couldn't escape. The verdict came on October 19, 1962, guilty of murder. But the judges ruled that Stashynsky was a tool of the Soviet state. The true criminals were his superiors in Moscow, particularly Alexander Shelepin and the KGB officials who had ordered the assassinations. Sentence: 8 years imprisonment. By Cold War assassination standards, it was remarkably lenient. The court acknowledged that Stashynsky had been pressured, that he'd confessed voluntarily, and that he'd cooperated fully. He was released in 1966 after serving 4 years. German authorities gave him a new identity and protection. He disappeared into anonymity. His whereabouts today remain unknown. He would be in his early 90s if still alive. The Stashynsky case exposed one of the Cold War's darkest realities: state-sponsored assassination conducted with scientific precision and plausible deniability. The poison spray gun represented the KGB's philosophy of murder: make it look natural, leave no evidence, and ensure the assassin escapes undetected. What made this case extraordinary wasn't just the weapon, it was the confession. No KGB assassin had ever defected and revealed operational details. Stashynsky's testimony gave Western intelligence unprecedented insight into Soviet assassination methods. It confirmed what many suspected but couldn't prove. The KGB was actively murdering dissidents on Western soil. The diplomatic fallout was significant. West Germany formally protested to the Soviet Union. The murders became a symbol of Soviet ruthlessness. Ukrainian émigré communities were validated. Their fears of Soviet reach were real, but questions remain. How many other assassinations did Laboratory 12 weapons enable? How many deaths, ruled natural causes, were actually KGB murders? The poison spray gun used on Rebet and Bandera was refined and improved. Later versions were even more sophisticated. The KGB didn't abandon the concept. They perfected it. In 1978, nearly 20 years after the Stashynsky confessions, the ricin umbrella was used to kill Georgy Markov in London, as we covered in video number 3. Same principle: undetectable poison, natural-looking death. The technology evolved, but the methodology remained. Stashynsky's confession was an act of extraordinary courage or unbearable guilt, perhaps both. He betrayed the Soviet Union, exposed the KGB's secrets, and likely signed his own death warrant. The KGB wanted him dead, and probably still does if he's alive. That he survived this long is remarkable. German protection, a new identity, and complete disappearance have kept him safe for over 60 years. The 2 men he killed, Lev Rebet and Stepan Bandera, are remembered as martyrs in the Ukrainian independence movement. Their assassinations didn't silence the cause they fought for. If anything, it strengthened it. Today, Bandera remains a controversial figure, revered by some as a freedom fighter, condemned by others for his wartime associations. But his murder by a Soviet assassin is historical fact. The poison spray gun itself was never recovered. Stashynsky claimed he threw it in the Isar River after the Bandera assassination. If it's still there, Buried in river sediment, it remains one of the Cold War's most significant material artifacts. What we're left with is the testimony, the confession, the knowledge that for several years in the late 1950s, a young Ukrainian man walked the streets of Munich carrying a metal tube filled with death, following orders from Moscow to eliminate enemies of the state, and then consumed by guilt. He did what no one expected. He told the truth. This was the poison spray gun, the weapon that killed with mist, the assassination tool that was exposed by the assassin himself.